harms society to an extent, because a lot of people with mental problems smoke, Robert.
Yes, indeed. Mental health is a huge issue in New Zealand. Maybe 10 to 15% are depressed, have experienced depression at one stage or other. And, of course, people with mental health issues a much higher rate of dying than the rest of us, and smoking contributes to that.
That's interesting.
So it's very important that the people with mental health issues be given all the support they can to stop. And this study is both encouraging and depressing itself. It does show that if you are depressed, you're less likely to stop. We know that.
Makes sense.
That if you do stop, you feel better about yourself. And of course, any smoker, depressed or not, who stops feels better about themselves, especially if they can, remain a non-smoker for a considerable amount of time. So what it suggests to me is that if we are to achieve the smoke-free goal of 2025 with a very low, minimal smoking prevalence rate, we have to give much more attention to people at high risk, including people who are depressed. And this study shows that you can do that, and it makes a difference.
It does, doesn't it? Thank you, Robert. Professor Robert Beggerholz. So you feel you've got your health and life back when you quit, and it makes you feel better. Haven't left you much time, May, but the possibility of Donald Trump being impeached.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, he's barely got in, and they've already started collecting information to do it. It's Article 2 of the US Constitution. You've got to show treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanours. The issue is whether by retaining some of the interests he's retained and by handing the rest over to his sons, he's really put himself in a position where it's not just the appearance of a conflict of interest, but whether it's an actual conflict of interest. Now, of course, that depends on the facts of each situation, but if it's not a blind trust that he's handed the rest of his
it's not a blind trust.
I mean, it's his sons, right?
Yeah, it is.
So you've got a direct conflict of interest there. So, we would call that nepotism. We would call that a conflict of interest in the law in New Zealand. If, for example, I was just involved in a court case where there was a panel member assessing tenders and, one of the tenders came in from a family member. So there's a direct conflict of interest there. So I don't understand how his lawyers are able to explain to him that there's no actual conflict of interest in the arrangement that he's left himself. I have to say that when I've been advising people in his situation, I haven't advised the US president, but I've advised plenty of other CEOs, we just don't go there. We don't have the appearance of it. We don't have actual, because it's just messy. There's an issue all the time. And actually, he's caused a real problem for himself because it means that he now needs to absent himself from so many transactions that might possibly be construed as an actual conflict of interest.
Whereas if it was in a blind trust, he wouldn't need to.
Well, that's what John Key did, right? He stuck it in a blind trust. Who would know?
Yep. It is interesting. But how can he divest himself of the Trump empire? That's his huge problem.
Well, mate, he ran to be president and he should have thought of that.
Probably didn't think he was going to get in. That was the thing.
Very good to have both of you on the panel today. May Chen with Peter for you. Whawhatai, thank you.
Whawhatai, love it.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. And coming up very shortly, Checkpoint with John Campbell. We're back tomorrow.
Kia ora everyone, tonight on the programme, Bill English Live on the election year ahead. What does he want to achieve beyond the blindingly obvious? Of course, the 6-year-old who was taken across the Tasman on a small catamaran, she's back in New Zealand, but her father has not returned and there's now a warrant for his arrest. Tonight, both her mother and her father talk to us about that trip. Securing building facades in and around Wellington, the risk is now too great to ignore. Pumpkin Patch is over. Foreign students hit again. Donald Trump complaining about votes, even though he won. Should visitors be charged a fee to visit friends staying at campgrounds? And the Waitomo caves and carbon dioxide. All of that and more coming up after the pips and the news with Katrina.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. More than 300 buildings in earthquake-prone areas will be forced to strengthen their masonry facades and parapets under emergency regulations. The initiative follows a report by the New Zealand Society for Earthquake Engineers, which says Wellington, Lower Hutt and Marlborough have a heightened risk of an aftershock following last year's Kaikoura quake. The Society's president, Peter Smith, says masonry in retail areas such as Cuba Street in Wellington and Jackson Street in Petone is of greatest concern.
We're not trying to scaremonger in terms of the risk that is out there, but there is a heightened period of risk, and that heightened period of risk has a potential for causing loss of life, and we think that it's appropriate to take these measures that are proposed.
Peter Smith says 39 people were killed in the 2011 Canterbury earthquake because of unsecure masonry. The police say they won't be seeking the extradition of a man who sailed to Australia with his 6-year-old daughter. Alan Langdon failed to appear in the Te Awamutu District Court today on a charge of taking a child from New Zealand. The magistrate issued an arrest warrant after the police said they tried to serve a summons on Mr Langdon. Mr Langdon told Checkpoint he can't afford to travel to New Zealand and other obligations are keeping him in Australia.
At this stage I have no money for the ticket, and as I said, I have a legal obligation to take the boat to Port Kembla, and I don't know how long it's going to take. I've repaired the rudder. I don't have any money.
The police say the charge does not meet extradition requirements and the arrest warrant will be dealt with if Alan Langdon returns to New Zealand. The United States President is expected to sign executive orders tomorrow, which will include a temporary ban on most refugees and a suspension of visas for citizens of several Middle East and African countries. US media says Donald Trump will fulfill a campaign promise and order a multi-month ban on allowing refugees into the US, except for religious minorities escaping persecution, until more aggressive vetting is in place. Mr Trump is also considering measures to tighten border security, which could include directing a border wall with Mexico to be built. Senior Republicans are warning the president to stop making claims of widespread voter fraud. Donald Trump has repeated his belief that he lost the popular vote to Hillary Clinton because more than 3 million people voted illegally. A Republican Senator, Lindsey Graham, says the comments are inappropriate for a president who has no proof of any such fraud.
I would urge the president to knock this off. This is the greatest democracy on earth. You're the leader of the free world, and people are going to start doubting you as a person if you keep making accusations against our electoral system without justification.
Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. The Speaker of the House of Representatives, Paul Ryan, also says Mr Trump should drop the unsubstantiated claims. New Zealand is back on top of the latest anti-corruption global rankings after slipping to 4th last year. The Justice Minister, Amy Adams, says initiatives such as introducing new bribery offences, fast-tracking anti-money laundering reforms and ratifying the UN Convention Against Corruption has helped lift New Zealand to number 1, tied with Denmark. Countries are scored highly for press freedom, public access to information about government spending and fair judges. The Waitomo glowworm caves have had to be shut about 5 times over summer because of excessive levels of carbon dioxide, with a high number of visitors. About 500,000 people visit the Waitomo caves every year. Tourism Holdings has the lease for the caves and says the carbon dioxide levels can't be attributed just to visitor numbers and also have a lot to do with climatic conditions and ventilation. But the chair of the Environmental Advisory Group, Chris De Freitas, says the caves are incredibly sensitive environments and he wants the government to provide better protection. Kiwi Rail says it's cleared slips on the line from Christchurch to the West Coast and it will begin running services tomorrow. Since last week's bad weather, the Transalpine has been going only as far as Arthur's Pass. Kiwi Rail will also be running overnight freight trains on the line. It's 5:04. To sport, second seed Serena Williams will meet Croatian Mirjana Lucic-Baroni in the semi-finals of the Australian Open tennis tournament in Melbourne. Williams has scored in straight sets victory over ninth seed Johanna Konta of Great Britain in their quarter-final, while Lucic-Baroni beat Karolina Pliskova of the Czech Republic in 3. The last time Lucic-Baroni made a Grand Slam semi-final was 18 years ago at Wimbledon. The All Black winger Nehe Milner-Skudder says there was never any doubt he was going to continue playing his rugby in New Zealand. Milner-Skudder has signed on until after the 2019 World Cup. The 26-year-old Hurricane played just 2 games last year before suffering a season-ending shoulder injury.
Oh, I love it here. It was pretty much a no-brainer. Me and my partner are really happy here in Wellington. Love the organisation. To sign on for another couple more years with Manawatu as well. That's where I grew up, and it's pretty much kind of home for me. And then to hang around in New Zealand and try and have another opportunity to put on the black jersey again is huge. So it was a pretty easy one really.
Nehe Milner-Skudder. The New Zealand cyclist Joseph Copper has taken over the Tour leader's yellow jersey after finishing 3rd in the 4th stage of the New Zealand Cycle Classic in the Wairarapa. And Black Cap opener Martin Guptill has hit a century for Auckland as they scored 392, batting first on their one-day game against Central Districts at Eden Park. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Paul Morris talks about Victoria University's new course on evil. We're hoping it's not a how to do it kind of thing. Liam Neeson talks about his latest screen role as a tree. There's a window on the world of Trump's tweets. And Will Flockton reports in from Brighton, where the locals are wondering what Brexit means for Sussex winemakers' attempts to break into the big time. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. A brief period of rain this afternoon or evening. Fine tomorrow. Waitomo to Wellington, including the central high country, also Wairarapa. Rain clearing and severe northwesterly gales in Wellington and Wairarapa easing. Fine tomorrow, apart from areas of morning and evening cloud. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few spots of rain today. Fine tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine but isolated showers about Canterbury in the afternoon and evening. Bulla and Westland, a few showers turning to rain in Westland tonight and Bulla later tomorrow. For Fiordland, periods of rain, sometimes heavy with thunderstorms. Otago and Southland, a few showers more frequent and heavier tomorrow with possible thunderstorms in eastern Otago. The Chatham Islands, a period of rain tonight, fine tomorrow. It's 5:07 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thank you so much, Katrina. Tonight on the programme, Bill English Live on the election year ahead. What does he want to achieve beyond the obvious? Of course, we've got a bit of time with him. That's after 6 o'clock. So if there's something you're interested in us discussing with him, please do contact. Also tonight, the 6-year-old who was taken across the Tasman on a small catamaran is back in New Zealand, but her father has not returned and there is a warrant for her arrest. That is coming up in a moment. More bad news, for his arrest. More bad news for foreign students in New Zealand. Carbon dioxide in the Waitomo Caves. And the Oscars are somewhat less white than they have been in the past couple of years. But we do begin with one of the most extraordinary New Zealand stories of the Christmas period. Alan Langdon taking his 6-year-old daughter, Qui, across the Tasman in a small home-built catamaran with no marine radio. The pair left Kawhia Harbour on the 17th of December. They were meant to be sailing up the west coast to the Bay of Islands. When there was no word from them, a large search and rescue operation was launched. A court order for Qui's passport to be held meant they shouldn't have left New Zealand, full stop. But despite the search party, including an Air Force Orion, small fixed-wing aircraft, a rescue helicopter, the Coast Guard in the air and on the sea, commercial aircraft and private boats, nothing was found. On the 3rd of January, the search was called off. 9 days later, the pair were found in Australia. Alan Langdon said a rudder had broken. But he was charged with removing his daughter from the country, knowing proceedings were pending under the Care of Children Act. This is also a complex custody case, of course. Today, he didn't appear in the Te Awamutu District Court and a warrant was immediately issued for his arrest. I asked Qui's mother, Ariane Weiler, if she was surprised Alan Langdon had not returned from Australia. Ariane, it's lovely to meet you. Alan hasn't turned up in court today, a warrant for his arrest. Are you surprised by that?
Not really, no.
So as far as you're aware, he's still in Australia?
As far as I know, he's still in Australia, yep.
What was it like to be reunited with Qui?
Oh, it was fantastic. It was just so beautiful to hold her in my arms and just have her smile and just be a happy girl. And just to be in her presence, you know, that was just really amazing.
How long was it when you had no idea where she was?
Far too long.
And what was it like?
The not knowing has been really quite stressful, and you have to know it's not only me as her mother, but it's a whole lot of people that didn't know and were very worried about, where were they, their whereabouts, and then also they were at sea, and you never know, yes.
So you knew they'd gone to sea, right? And you'd been told that?
I've been told that. On the 20th of December, I've spoken with someone that told me that they were at sea, but I didn't know anything else.
What would that cat have been like crossing the Tasman? What would it have been like on board? How did they sleep? How many sleeping berths were there?
As far as I'm aware, there was just one space, one of the hulls that was set up as a sleeping quarter. So basically, Kui would sleep and be down there in rough weathers. But I was told, Kui told me that when Alan needed a rest, as he would have, he would be down below and she'd be up on deck. So, yeah.
So she would be up on deck in the middle of the Tasman alone?
Maybe, yes. As to, it would have been maybe nice weather. She told me it was always boiling hot, so she had to be up there in the sun while he was having a nap. Yeah.
There's all sorts of reasons they shouldn't have been in Australia, and the most clear-cut and explicit reason was that there was border controls on Kui leaving New Zealand, right? So you had sought those to make sure that she remained in New Zealand.
Yes, this happened last year, halfway through last year.
July of last year?
Yes.
And that was quite explicit. So that was an order that Kui could not be removed from New Zealand without applications, special permissions and all that kind of stuff.
Basically, the family court requested that Kui's passport was handed in to the courts, to the registrar.
And had that happened?
I was informed that that had happened on the 14th of December, 3 days prior to them leaving.
So if they'd wanted to go to Australia on a commercial flight, they simply wouldn't have been able to. The only way Ellen was able to get Kui into Australia with those orders out was either to get a special permission, which you obviously would have been able to oppose, or to take her on a cat without telling anyone he was doing so.
Yes, that's right.
What do you think about all of this? What do you think about sailing on a small cat with only one sleeping berth, meaning that when Ellen slept, Kui had to be up on deck on her own across the Tasman?
It's definitely a challenging sea, as in the Tasman. I've only sailed in the Tasman coming from Vanuatu to New Zealand on our big boat, which is more than twice as big as what they travelled on. It's quite, I think it was very irresponsible of Alan not to have had an EPIRB or marine radio. That's what I was told. I don't know whether that's for sure.
And did the cat have a long-range radio?
No, I doubt that.
So,
as far as I'm aware, he had a cell phone. Alan had a cell phone, but not even a VHF radio. But to be honest, I just don't know that, as I have not spoken with Alan personally.
So if he didn't have an EPIRB and he didn't have a long-range radio and the boat had been hit by a rogue wave and capsized or something awful had happened, how would anyone have known where he was? How would he have been able to raise the alarm?
Nobody. Nobody would have known, and he would have just had to deal with that situation then and there.
This has been a difficult custody issue between you and Ellen, and it's ongoing. It's before the family court, so I don't want to talk about that. But and we can't talk about it anyway.
Yes.
But when you found out Kui was in Australia, that she was alive and well, that you were going to be able to see her and, as it's turned out, get her, what was that like?
I was over the moon, obviously, to finally know where she is and just meet her, see her again.
So you got on a plane immediately from Switzerland to Australia?
Fairly quickly, yes. Packed my bags and I was gone, yeah.
That's Qui's mother, Ariana Weiler. Qui was playing very happily not too far away from us. They are heading to the South Island to start a new life, including school enrolment. Whilst I was interviewing Ariana, Alan Langdon, who shares joint custody of Qui, phoned our office from Australia to say he could not afford to return to New Zealand. He was meant to be back in that Te Awamutu District Court today. He told our producer, Bridget Burke, he'd not heard from anyone in New Zealand since he arrived in Australia. He says he misses his 6-year-old daughter and hopes they will be reunited in the future.
There's no point in me coming to New Zealand. Oh, come to New Zealand to defend the charges. Well, actually, I did take that child to Australia with the full knowledge that she wasn't to be removed. The fact is I did that. So,
Alan, have New Zealand police been in touch with you today?
no, I haven't been in touch with me at all.
At all?
From New Zealand, nothing.
Not since any of this has happened? Not since...
I've been up at the police station.
So New Zealand police have made zero contact with you during this whole process, including while you were sailing and when you got to Australia?
Yep.
You've not heard from the New Zealand authorities, not Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not police, courts,
Nothing, no.
lawyers, nothing?
No, the only one that got in touch on email was Rangers, somebody saying that the Coast Guard was searching for me from New Zealand.
No.
And the first thing I did when I got my phone working when I got here was I emailed back to him to say safe and sound, all okay.
Did you have any intentions of sailing to the Bay of Islands at all?
The Bay of Islands was where we were going, yes.
Right.
My main concern was actually always safety of the craft and the people on it, me and my daughter.
Alan, if the rudder broke, why didn't you turn around and come home?
Well, home is Australia anyway, but why didn't I turn around and go back to Carfia?
Yeah.
Or turn around and go back to New Zealand? Immediately, the rudder was broken. First of all, was stabilising the boat. First of all, I had to get the rudder pins out and get the rudder on the deck, and then make an assessment. First of all, I had to make sure that there was not going to be any more damage to the boat or to the rudder. I just minimised, the rudder's broken. Okay, I've got to deal with that. So my immediate concern was the vessel and the rudder. At that stage, when the rudder broke, it was damage control. There was never any drama. Qui was happy. Qui was healthy. The doctors say that. Everybody at Media says that. She loved it. She loved the trip. She considers the whales and dolphins and albatrosses and terns, and she calls them her brothers and sisters. They come round and they love children, especially the whales. We had a pod of whales follow us for about maybe 500 miles. There was a few juveniles in there. And when Qui went down below, because we come up and she comes up on deck when I tell her, oh, the whales are here. And when she went back down below, one of the whales came over and bumped its head gently right on the side where she was, on the side of the hull there.
Can we just check now whether it's correct or not that you didn't have an emergency beacon on board the boat or an EPIRB of any type?
Yeah, I had an EPIRB. It wasn't easily accessible. And when they searched the boat here to check it for food and stuff, it was there in the boat. Yeah. It's not registered to the boat because the boat's not registered, so you can't register an EPIRB to the boat when the boat isn't registered. But anyway. Oh,
well, okay, so... Was there any point at which you were sleeping and left Qui alone on the deck?
Never. And in a small boat, we were never out of contact with each other. We had a system of knocking on the boat. That if I was outside steering and she was inside, I'd knock and she'd knock back. But we were always talking to each other, and I always knew where she was. 100%. She was never on the deck without me.
Just in terms of handing in Qui's passport, so she didn't have a passport when you went to Australia. So had you... Her
passport got issued to me in Australia, and it got issued to me without her mother's consent. And that was legal because Ariane her mother was being very awkward about that. Her passport expired just after we'd been in New Zealand in 2015.
And it's a New Zealand passport?
It's an Australian passport. Qui's an Australian. She got her Australian passport out of Manila when she was born. This confusion about this New Zealand passport, she isn't a New Zealander. She's never been in New Zealand. She doesn't qualify for a New Zealand passport. She's an Australian with an Australian passport.
It must be really difficult, Alan. You're in a position now where you're in Australia. There's a warrant in New Zealand out for your arrest. You'll want to probably come back to New Zealand at some point to reconnect with Qui, your daughter.
I want Qui to come home to Australia.
Okay.
I want her to come and visit. She's an Australian. She's got the right to have all the benefits and privileges of being an Australian. I mean, nothing against New Zealand, but Australia's pretty good, mate.
Can you describe to me when you were working on your boat and that moment when Kui went to the toilet, I think it was?
The CCTV footage shows a group of men, 27 seconds they took to get her out of the toilet and take her away. But there's a group of men, and believe me, they're scary-looking big guys all dressed in black with hoodies and dark sunglasses, and I was here. I saw some of these people. The public area, I thought, oh, some of those guys look a bit shady, but not my,
But they'd come to take your daughter. They'd come to take your daughter off you, and you haven't seen her since, nor spoken to her since that moment.
I haven't seen her or spoken to her, and no one that I know, none of my and Kui's friends know anything about Kui. No one that we know anything about Kui.
And have Australian authorities been able to help you?
No.
Have you asked for their help?
Oh, the police were here straight away. Then I have definitely asked for their help. But what's happened now is they too were under the assumption that she was a New Zealander. She's an Australian, living in Australia with her Australian father.
Alan, are you going to come back to New Zealand to get her?
At the moment, I don't have any money, and I have this commitment to taking the boat. I've signed the documents. I've got to take the boat to Port Kembla. And that's a little way up the coast, and the weather here is, that's in charge. I don't control the weather. Come back to New Zealand to get her. I mean, I don't know how to answer that question without babbling. I'm here for my daughter. I'd like to be just across the room from her, and I'd like to think that she'd want to run over and hug with me.
But you're not coming back to New Zealand?
There's no point in my returning to New Zealand to hang around waiting for the courts to decide that I can either talk to my daughter or see her, or I hope she's got people that she's comfortable with and happy to be around, and she's playing and laughing, and these are the things that I can't dwell on the fact that she might be missing me. I know I'm missing her, but I can't dwell on that either. I've got to get on with the things that need to get done, so it just hurts. It hurts. Yeah, I guess you can understand that.
Alan Langdon talking to our producer Bridget Burke this afternoon, strikingly different versions of events depending on who you talk to. I did see Kui this afternoon. She was playing very happily, feeding some sheep when I saw her. We have gone to the police to try and ascertain, actually get some clarity around whether or not Alan Langdon was contacted formally and told he had to be back in New Zealand today for that court appearance. We're waiting to hear back from them. Kui's mum obviously says she is safe and well and happy here in New Zealand. It's 5:22. We go to the centre of the country now, where the owners of about 300 buildings, mainly in Wellington, will be made to urgently secure masonry facades and parapets in the wake of that Kaikoura earthquake. The government is using emergency powers introduced after the November quake to require the work in Wellington, the Hutt Valley, and Blenheim, where there is a heightened risk in that centre of the country region of an aftershock. And it's set aside $3 million in funding to pay for half of the work. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
Official advice indicates that Wellington, Lower Hutt and Blenheim are 8 times more likely to be hit by aftershocks over the next 3 years than before the Kaikoura quake. The Minister for Building and Construction, Nick Smith, says it's only prudent to ensure that any masonry in those areas are secure.
The buildings that are affected are those unreinforced masonry buildings with those facades and parapets that are in high public access areas, and these are the types of buildings that killed 39 people in the February 22nd shake in Christchurch.
Dr Smith says the government has set up a $3 million fund that, together with local councils, will cover up to half the cost of the work. He says the work won't require a resource consent and is expected to cost about $20,000 to $30,000 per building.
The powers will rest with the council to actually just get on and do the work and to bill the property owner. Furthermore, there is the power under the Building Act for a fine of up to $200,000 in the event that any one of those 300 building owners ignore this new legal requirement we're putting in place.
The initiative follows a report provided by the New Zealand Society for Earthquake Engineers last month, which highlighted the new risks created by the Kaikoura tremor. The Society's president, Peter Smith, says commercial and retail areas such as Cuba Street in Wellington and Jackson Street in Petone are of greatest concern.
We're not trying to scaremonger in terms of the risk that is out there, but there is a heightened period of risk, and that heightened period of risk has a potential for causing loss of life, and we think that it's appropriate to take these measures that are proposed.
Justin Lester, the Mayor of Wellington, where 250 of the 300 buildings are located, says the move is a sensible precaution.
We've said consistently here in Wellington, we want to make sure the city is safe, we want to make sure that Wellingtonians feel safe, and this is one aspect of the built environment across the city that we can improve. Public safety has been our paramount concern since we had the earthquake in November of last year.
The regulations are to be put in place by the end of February, with affected buildings to be notified in March. Building owners will be required to do the work within 12 months. From Parliament for Checkpoint, Demelza Leslie.
Dirty classrooms, a head business tutor with no business qualifications and piles of unmarked assignments. That's the catalogue of failures laid bare in an official report into the Auckland's Aotearoa Tertiary Institute, which has been shut down by the Qualifications Authority. About 200 foreign students, most of them Indian, have been hit by the institute's closure. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen has been reading the NZQA's report. Hi John, welcome to the program live from our Wellington studio. This is, well, pretty damning, is it?
Yeah, look, absolutely. This report just paints the picture of a total shambles, really. It comes from a visit NZQA staff made by surprise. They didn't warn the Aotearoa Tertiary Institute they were coming in November, and the report that comes out of it just shows that everything from the cleaning through to the management was done badly. The classrooms were so small they couldn't fit all the students. Only about half of those who were enrolled in each class could really fit in. There were errors on the school's website. There wasn't a register for student complaints. They didn't monitor students' attendance. It just goes on and on.
Yeah, and let's talk about the bigger picture a bit later in this chat. But was any actual education of any value taking place here?
Well, you'd have to wonder about that, and the evidence in this report suggests that it would not have been of very high quality if it was taking place. The leader of the business program didn't actually have any business qualifications in his CV. There were two other business tutors, and they were supposed to have qualifications at least one level higher than what they were teaching, and it didn't appear that they did. The school wasn't checking either that these tutors' markings what was accurate and correct. They weren't conducting moderation, and most assessments for the past 2 years have been left in a pile. Some were in a tutor's office, some were stored off-site, and it wasn't clear that they'd been marked. And in fact, staff said that marking didn't happen until students graduated, which is very unusual.
That's a polite way of putting it, John. Very unusual indeed. Who was behind this seemingly, I'm going to not editorialise, I think we can all draw our own conclusions. Who was behind this outfit?
Okay, it had been run by a company called South Canterbury English Language Limited, which was owned by Yanji Zhao, but in September last year it was bought by Silver Ray Group. Now that's a Chinese company with two directors, one of whom, Hao Long, has an address in Auckland, but here's the thing, that transfer of ownership to Silver Ray Group was supposed to be approved by NZQA, and it wasn't. So that's another failure to stick to the rules.
Yeah. What happens to the students in this place?
Okay. There's about 200. Most of them are Indian students. There's also some Fijian and Chinese students. They can go on now to the Manukau Institute of Technology to complete their studies, or if they really want to, they could go elsewhere. But one of the problems is that because of the Aotearoa Tertiary Institute's bad record keeping, Manukau Institute of Technology is actually going to have to assess some of those students just to check some of the standards they supposedly have completed because they weren't actually registered with NZQA.
Goodness gracious me, John, let's return to the bigger picture here, and that is we keep hearing these stories. I mean, this just sounds abysmal. It actually sounds cynical, and we keep hearing about Indian students being chucked out of the country and all of this kind of stuff happening. At what stage is this going to bite the broader business on the bum and people simply going to stop coming to New Zealand for education?
Yeah, people in the sector certainly have been worried about that for a while now. We've had a deregistration of IANS last year. That was a big institution that was shut down, and many of the students had to be retested. We've also had students being threatened with deportation because of problems with their visas. But I think one of the things that's important to remember here, and I keep being told this by people, is that not all of the students are completely innocent here. Some of them are very keen to come for work permits and to live, and so they're enrolling in institutions they know won't deliver a great education, and so some of them are complicit. Others, of course, are caught up and, through no fault of their own, enrolling in these institutions. So it is a situation that needs to be sorted out.
Our education correspondent John Gerritsen. Thanks so much, John. We appreciate it. It's 5:30. Katrina next with the headlines. Bill English after 6 o'clock. We'd love to hear from you. What do you want to hear from Bill English? But just before Katrina joins us, a teenager who drove down the Kaimai Ranges on a cart says it was safe and just a bit of fun. A video of 18-year-old Travis Scott cruising down the dangerous stretch of road on State Highway 29, which you can see if you're watching online. And we do have people joining us on Facebook as well as all the other options tonight. Has had thousands of views and prompted the attention of the police. Here's Tom Furley.
Travis Scott says he and his friends had been going down hills near the Minden Lookout when they got bored, and he was dared to do the Kaimai Ranges. The video, filmed from inside a car following Mr. Scott, shows him topless and without a helmet, weaving down the road at speed. But he insists the ride was safe.
It was all good, I'm a pretty competent driver. I wasn't worried at all. Just the traffic was covered behind me, so I just stayed in my lane where I had to. And
he says he bought the cart, which he likened to a luge, online. While some online have reacted positively to his ride, others say it's dangerous and has put others at risk as he drives across the centre line and is visibly holding up traffic. But Mr. Scott isn't worried.
It wasn't that bad, some people might see it as dangerous. I just thought it was a bit of fun.
The police say it is not unlawful to use the luge on the road, but they strongly advise people against it due to the risk of serious injury. And Tauranga Police will be making further inquiries with Travis Scott.
I'd be pretty gutted if they got involved, to be honest, because I reckon it's just a bit of harmless fun. But, I'm pretty ready to take it on the chin if they want to charge me or something.
And this may not be Travis's last daredevil or foolhardy adventure. He jokingly promised online if his video got enough support, he'd travel down the Bombay Hills, something he says he's still considering for next week. For Checkpoint, Tom Furley.
28 minutes to 6 here with Checkpoint on RNZ. Thank you for being with us. Coming up on the program, claims from US President Donald Trump that widespread voter fraud cost him the popular vote. What caused the Waitomo glowworms caves to shut down over summer, and should visitors be charged a fee to visit friends staying at campgrounds? The holiday park owners who say they've had a guts full of freeloading guests, plus Nona after Katrina and Bill English after 6. Katrina Batten, it is time for the headlines.
Thank you. Alan Langdon says at no time did he receive contact from the police in New Zealand about a court appearance following charges of kidnapping. Buildings in Wellington's Cuba Street are among those forced to make their masonry and parapets more secure. The government has invoked emergency laws to make more than 300 buildings safer. Donald Trump is expected to restrict refugees entering the United States. The ban will be in place until a more permanent legislation can be passed. A Wellington campground has, as a last resort, decided to ban non-paying guests to stop them taking advantage of their facilities. And train services between Christchurch and the West Coast are to resume tomorrow after Kiwi Rail cleared slips on the line from last week's storms. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6.
Thank you very much, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now. Nona. Hi, Nona. Home loan interest rates are on the rise.
They are.
This has been predicted for some time, right? What's happening?
Yeah, so over the last few weeks, we've seen fixed rates, mostly in the fixed rates area, rise up. We've got 4.75% for a 2-year mortgage. That's more than we saw just 3 weeks ago at 4.5%. So yeah, we're going to see that. Now, why, you might ask? Because the Reserve Bank hasn't changed anything in terms of their official cash rate, right? But it's costing a lot more money for banks to borrow overseas. So they're not having the deposits they used to have. Now they've got to go overseas to get the money that they're lending back into the market. And that's more expensive. So
In the meantime, there are a whole lot of people, particularly in our major cities and particularly in Auckland, mortgaged up to the eyeballs,
Right.
in order to get into this incredible property market.
And they're going to be spending a lot more money, believe me, yeah. So we're looking at now some floating rates have been raised by banks to between 5.4 and 5.6%.
Right.
So that's a lot, you know.
It's a hell of a big margin on the official cash rate.
Especially when you look at the kinds of mortgages that people have against their homes. So it's a lot of cash, yeah.
Okay, we're going to follow up with the banks. We'll make some calls on this. Thanks,
well,
Nona.
there you go. And of course now we've got inflation data coming out tomorrow. Now we're expecting the inflation rate to move within the Reserve Bank's target range of 1 to 3%, which means the Reserve Bank is very unlikely to raise interest rates. So basically, both the banks have raised the rates because it's costing them more money. Inflation is on the rise as well. So we're unlikely to see the Reserve Bank do anything with our official cash rate. And of course, that's underpinning the value of the New Zealand dollar, which is holding steady at the moment, unlike the Australian dollar.
Which has done what?
Well, actually, the New Zealand dollar has increased 0.5 cent today against the Australian dollar.
That's a big rise on a day.
Yeah, the Australian dollar is not doing that well because their inflation is quite low, lower than the market was expecting, and that means that it's possible that the Reserve Bank of Australia might actually lower interest rates. So it's a kind of a complicated, mix of things going on in the world. When you look at the markets generally, though, it's very much a Donald Trump story. Everything that he's doing is having more of an influence on the markets than anything else. So we're seeing a lot of a lot of turmoil somewhat. People are taking positions. So one day the dollar's up, the next day the dollar's down. It just really depends on the weather, really.
Speaking of Donald Trump, we'll have more on him later.
Right.
He's complaining about something, so we'll update that. I want to talk briefly about Pumpkin Patch. Can you talk to us about Pumpkin Patch?
Yeah.
So Pumpkin Patch has it's all over today, right? All the staff have lost their jobs.
Not all of the staff. In fact, so the distribution staff, they lost their jobs today. They no longer have any stock to distribute.
And the union told us that some of them have been there for a very long time. One of them, I think, had been there for 26 of the 27-year life of the company. Really? How much redundancy is he or she getting?
Nothing. No, nothing, really. There was no money left in the kitty for them. Now, they're going to get their holiday pay, so they get something. But that's really the least that they should get. Okay, so the way it works is basically Pumpkin Patch had two operating arms. One of them was the company that distributed the stock and ran the head office, and the other was the retail arm, which had the stock. So the retail staff have redundancy agreements, and they do have redundancy agreements. They will be given their full entitlement when a good number of them are going to lose their job at the end of this month.
Right.
And then the rest will be sort of towards the middle of February when the rest of the stores close.
But the distribution staff were in some kind of standalone operation, were they?
Well, yeah. So the way that the company was structured was that one part of the company had held the stock and the other part of the company didn't hold the stock. So when the receiver started selling up, of course, the money wasn't there. So so there's, I think, 15 people in the distribution. They're not going to get any redundancy payments. They're going to get their holidays. The retail staff that qualified for their redundancy, so it's the same package as whatever, people sometimes depends on how long they work there. They'll get their full redundancy payouts.
That's crappy for those distribution
it's really
staff
been
people.
A tough go. But Pumpkin Patch, we're almost done with that. Now, the one thing that is still of value within the company is the brand. The receiver has some expressions of interest in purchasing the brand, but none of the stock and none of the other assets of the company.
Right. Nona, just before you go, did we talk about the share market? We talked about the dollar.
We did.
Up 0.5% against the Aussie, but what about the share market?
Yeah,
just before
okay,
you
we
move on?
rose 0.4%. That's 27 points to 7,091. The New Zealand dollar was trading at 72.5 US cents and 96 cents Australian.
Nona Peltier, thank you so much. The famed tourist attraction, the Waitomo glowworm caves, had to shut a number of times over summer because, believe it or not, excessive carbon dioxide levels, driven partly by booming visitor numbers, meant that, there were times people couldn't go in. The chair of the cave's environmental advisory group is worried the burgeoning tourist numbers could mean for one of the country's most visited natural features. He told Kate Gudsell the potential to damage the caves is very high, and he wants the government to step up and provide better protection.
About 500,000 people visit the Waitomo glowworm caves every year, making them the most popular caves in the Southern Hemisphere. Tourism Holdings is the leaseholder and operates the Discover Waitomo Group, which includes the Waitomo Glowworm Caves, Ruakuri Cave and Aranui Cave. The Chief Executive of Tourism Holdings, Grant Webster, says the Glowworm Caves have been shut down about 5 times over summer because the level of carbon dioxide in the caves has got too high.
There have been some occasions where we've closed the caves for short periods of time to manage the CO2 levels within the cave. That's not an unusual occurrence, and it's something that's happened year on year.
Mr Webster says visitors are usually very understanding about the closures, which are not often for long periods.
The time varies again, very much dependent on the weather and what's happening. So it could be anything from half an hour can actually bring the levels back down quite quickly through to it could be 2 or 3 hours.
Grant Webster says it's not just visitors who are to blame for carbon dioxide levels, with weather and ventilation also playing a role. But the chair of the operator's External Environmental Advisory Group, an expert scientist in this field, Auckland University Professor Chris de Freitas, has no doubt about the cause.
There is a link, a very close link. The more people in the cave at any one time, the higher the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And of course, that's a key facet of the physical environment of the cave, and it affects the cave's environment as well as the ecosystems within the cave.
A senior lecturer at Waikato University, Adam Hartland, works on cave systems. He says more people will mean higher carbon levels, but he says Tourism Holdings is responding appropriately.
The likelihood is that any corrosion that's happening would be happening very slowly. So, we're not likely to see stalagmites dissolving before our eyes anytime soon. However, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't, be cognizant of that and try and manage it conservatively. When it comes to the glowworms, my understanding is that they don't appear to be showing a great deal of sensitivity to the CO2 levels that they're experiencing.
Dr de Freitas says caves are incredibly sensitive and damage can take tens of thousands of years to heal. And he believes the government has a custodial role to play in the preservation of caves, similar to what DOT does with national parks or marine reserves.
It's a gaping hole in New Zealand's environmental legislation. There's no protection at all for caves, or no management guidelines for show caves or commercial tourist caves. This is in sharp contrast to, say, places like Croatia, Slovenia, Italy, where they're very sophisticated legislation in place, even Australia, to protect caves that are used for tourists and ensure that they're properly managed.
Dr de Freitas says it's sheer good luck that Tourism Holdings is managing the caves in a responsible and conscientious way, because there is no legislative obligation to require it to do so. For Checkpoint, ko kei Gutsel tēnei.
18 minutes to 6. A Kapiti Coast campground has banned visitors, saying freeloaders are costing the facility too much money. Marilyn Hazelwood says, who's managed the Paikakariki holiday park for nearly 10 years, she's tried to introduce a visitor's fee, something common in busy parks around the country, but people simply refuse to pay it. So after 3 years of dealing with upwards of 50 non-paying visitors turning up on some days, she says the ban is a last resort to ensure the facilities are left available for paying guests. Some people are unhappy with the move. People have contacted the park saying they'll boycott it. Our reporter Zach Fleming spoke to Ms Hazelwood earlier today.
Of course, each case is on merit. We have people here, older people, they have caravans on site, and we know that they like to have their friends in for a cup of tea, and we're aware of their friends coming in, and we're fine with that. We've discussed it with them. But it's really when you see them coming in for the day with their picnic baskets and their deck chairs and kids in tow. Those kids are going to need a shower after they've been to the beach, and it's exactly what happens is that they do use the showers. We're not big and modern like a lot of the campgrounds that you get, like likes of Top 10 who have the latest facilities. We've done ours up as money allows, but we don't have all the sites are full, so that is our capacity.
And you tried instigating a fee for visitors, but that didn't work?
We did a few years ago. No, it didn't work because people didn't come up to the office.
Do you feel like this was a last resort for you?
We do, yeah.
Do you appreciate that some people feel that it's a bit unfair? What would you say to them?
Well, I think they really need to understand that we're running a business and that we supply the amenities, facilities for those that pay to come here to stay. We don't want to double our numbers at any time because they think, well, we'll invite our friends up for the day. They're only a half hour up the road. We can have a nice time together. They could have a nice time together outside the gates. It's in place and it will stay. I can't really see any other way around it.
That's Marilyn Hazelwood, the manager of the Paikakariki Holiday Park, just up the coast from Wellington, speaking to our reporter Zach Fleming. And the owner of the Waihi Top 10 Holiday Park, Ian Smith, says, well, actually, he sympathises. He says he's also struggled with visitors refusing to pay a fee and that people often feel entitled to simply walk in and, for example, use his park's heated swimming pool for free.
It's not unusual if anyone goes and stands at my front gate with me for half an hour to catch numbers of people walking into the park with their dogs, and when asked where they're going, saying, oh, we're just popping in to use the pool, even though there's a sign that says all visitors must report to the office and sign in. They choose to ignore that. And the worst case scenario I can think of recently was a family of 10 walking in with their kids and everything. They didn't even know anyone in the park. They were staying in a booker batch and they just thought they would come in and use the park facilities. We were at 100% capacity. They don't see the other side of the coin when guests are coming up and complaining because the pool is totally overcrowded. The playground, their kids can't get on it because there's so many other kids there. Prior to us starting to charge visitors during summer, there were times where I was pretty much convinced that we had more visitors in the park than paying guests, and that seems to be unreasonable when people are paying money to come and enjoy a place, including its facilities. We always say to guests, look, it's a big crowd of you, you don't want to pay to come in, there's plenty of cafes, the beach straight across the road, you can always meet up with family and friends there, it doesn't have to be within the environs of the holiday park.
It's Ian Smith of Waihi's Top 10 Holiday Park. Whatever you think of Donald Trump, and our email inbox does rather suggest it's not very much. He won, he is now President of the United States, but among the people unhappy about the way he won is, yes, Donald Trump himself. He's repeated his belief that millions of people voted illegally and without providing any evidence whatsoever says widespread voter fraud cost him the popular vote. Now, as we all know, Mr Trump won the Electoral College, which decides the presidency, but lost the popular vote by the biggest margin ever for a president, receiving 2.9 million votes fewer than Hillary Clinton. Today, at another testy media conference, the White House stood by the claims that illegal voters were to blame. CNN's Jeff Zeleny was there.
The White House is standing by President Donald Trump's unsubstantiated claim that millions of people voted illegally in the November election.
The president does believe that. He has stated that before. I think he stated his concerns of voter fraud and people voting illegally during the campaign. And he continues to maintain that belief based on studies and evidence that people have presented to him.
Press Secretary Sean Spicer doubling down on the president's claim, but repeatedly unable to point to evidence that backs up the charge that has been debunked by Republicans and Democrats alike.
You said the president believes that there was voter fraud. I wonder if you believe that. You were at the Republican National Committee at the time, and Chief of Staff Reince Priebus was the chairman of the RNC at the time. Do you believe there was widespread voter fraud?
My job is not, look,
how can he be comfortable with his win if he believes
he's very
there
comfortable
was
with his
3
win.
million votes? Maybe he didn't win.
No, he's very comfortable with his win. It's an electoral-based system. He got 306 electoral votes. 33 of 50 states voted for him. I think, look, Jeff, I've asked and answered this question twice. He believes what he believes based on the information he's provided. Yes, ma'am.
What does that mean for democracy, though, Sean? What does that
Thanks,
mean?
Jeff.
If he does believe that, what does that mean for democracy?
It means
Sean?
that I've answered your question.
Have you?
The allegations of voter fraud, which Trump has repeatedly made before taking office, surfaced again after the president repeated that claim while meeting with congressional leaders at the White House.
No, I think he won very, very handily. He's very comfortable with his win.
But he doesn't sound like it. He won the Electoral College but lost the popular vote by nearly 3 million. He charged that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally, a claim as unsubstantiated as when he first made it after the election. But now it carries the weight of the presidency. To back up the allegations, his advisors have pointed to a 2012 study by the Pew Center. It found nearly 3 million people have voter registrations in more than one state, and nearly 2 million people are listed as dead. But the study made no finding of voter fraud, which election officials from both sides have dismissed. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham said if Trump believes it, he should disclose his proof and ask for an investigation.
So I would urge the president to knock this off. This is the greatest democracy on earth.
you're the leader of the free world, and people are going to start doubting you as a person.
From the White House podium, Spicer left open the door to launching an investigation, but repeatedly brushed aside questions from reporters.
There is no investigation. I said it was possible. Anything is possible. It was a hypothetical question. My point to you is that to ask us on day 2, he made a comment last night on something that he has believed and said for a long, long time.
Even as he gets to work laying out his agenda, Trump is still on a quest to prove his legitimacy. The exchange came on the 4th full day of Trump's presidency, overshadowing his executive actions to revive the Keystone Pipeline and clear the way for the Dakota Access Pipeline. 2 more reversals of the Obama administration.
That's CNN's Jeff Zeleny reporting. US media is now also reporting that Donald Trump is expected to fulfill another campaign promise tomorrow and will sign executive orders implementing a temporary ban on most refugees and a suspension of visas for citizens of several Middle East and African countries. Obviously, we'll cover that on Checkpoint if it does indeed happen. And he may also look to move on the construction of a border wall with Mexico. All of that, we are told, in the next 24 to 48 hours. It's 9.5 to 6. After 45 years, the world-renowned Dunedin study has moved into a purpose-built permanent home. The study, whose full name is the Dunedin Multidisciplinary Health and Development Study, has been lauded globally for following 1,000 people born in the city in 1972 and 1973, tracking every aspect of their lives and doing research which has changed our understanding of human development. It's been a remarkable study, and today it got its own building on the fringes of the Otago University campus. Our reporter Ian Telfer was at the opening.
The Dunedin study has a global name, but it's only now that its future's really guaranteed. After a brief tour of its first purpose-built home, the new Minister for Tertiary Education, Paul Goldsmith, unveiled a plaque in front of 100 guests. He told them New Zealand can't be a freeloader on international science, and the Dunedin study shows it's not.
We're a small place, but we can actually contribute to the global pool of knowledge, understanding humanity and how our lives evolve. And the study's been going for 40-odd years, published an immense number of papers, and it's just so exciting to be able to lay the foundation for decades to come.
The study's yielded more than 1,200 research publications, covering everything from the most medical of topics to the most social on how people grow up. It's led to major changes in social policy for physical and mental health around the world. The study's grown with its participants, who are remarkably loyal, 95% staying with the program for 45 years, despite being spread around the world. This 2-storey building even includes a participant's private car park, entrance and lounge, so they can remain anonymous. The man who started the study, founding director Phil Silver, is feeling proud and amazed. He says the study was never expected to last more than a couple of years.
We started off in a room the size of a cupboard at the back of the old Bowling Green Hotel. And then we went to a condemned Presbyterian manse. The problem with that was that the roof wasn't very stable. They were old Welsh slates, and I had to spend a lot of my research time fixing the roof. So that wasn't particularly productive.
Otago University's Vice-Chancellor, Harleen Hayne, says the building was well overdue.
The Dunedin Multidisciplinary Study is a major jewel in the university's crown, and today we're here to open a building that will allow them to continue the amazing work that they've been doing for the preceding 45 years. They've come from very humble beginnings. This research project started in a Sunday school classroom. Over the years, it's moved into less salubrious accommodation, but we're very happy today to open a building that's actually befitting the amazing work that these people are doing.
The study's director, Richie Poulton, says it'll continue for as long as any of the participants are still alive.
This is the home that people can be proud of, can feel good when they come to. It'll house stories on both sides of the fence, both the stories of people's lives and as members of the cohort, but also the stories of the researchers and their lives, because many of us are long timers. Now we're very, very chuffed in the most lovely way about this new accommodation. Couldn't be better.
The more than 950 participants, who are now turning 45 themselves, will begin using the building for their next set of assessments from April. yielding yet more knowledge about how humans can live longer and happier lives. In Dunedin for Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
From the Dunedin to the Oscars, the nominations are out, and it is a not-so-white lineup this year. There is more diversity after the Oscars-so-white controversy of the past 2 years. Yesterday, Checkpoint talked to April Rain, who coined that famous Twitter hashtag and began a movement in the process that really did see a response from Hollywood. She predicted an improvement, but not an explosion of diversity beyond an increase in black nominees, and she was bang on. This year, the standout film was the romantic musical La La Land, which has received 14 nominations, equalling the previous record. With more on the nominations, here's the BBC's Colin Patterson.
At the last 2 Oscars, every single acting nomination went to a white person. It led to the Oscars So White protests, forcing the Academy to recruit 600 new members to alter the makeup of those who vote.
What happened, Chiron? Why you didn't come home like you're supposed to, huh?
Naomi Harris, best known as Moneypenny in the Bond films, is one of 7 non-white acting nominees this year. Best Supporting Actress for playing a crack addict in Moonlight. Dev Patel is in the supporting actor category for Lion. The film critic Jason Solomon says the Academy is changing.
No one can now level it that the Oscars are so white, because in fact they are incredibly diverse. There's a real groundswell of opinion to change the colour of performances and the stories that are being told from a different kind of background on the big screen.
But while the Oscars are trying to diversify, history's been made by a film which harks back to the golden age of Hollywood.
City of stars.
The musical La La Land equalled the record for the most nominations ever, 14, tied with All About Eve and Titanic. It is the clear favourite to win Best Picture. These Oscars are also about the rehabilitation of Mel Gibson, who became persona non grata in Hollywood after drunken racist and sexist rants. He has his first nomination since winning with Braveheart, Best Director for Hacksaw Ridge.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sergeant. I can't touch a gun.
About a conscientious objector in the Second World War. Its hero is played by Andrew Garfield, who's nominated for Best Actor. The ceremony is on the 26th of February.
Meanwhile, an Australian-made film shot on Vanuatu has been nominated for Best Foreign Language Film. Tana is described as a Romeo and Juliet-style love story set in the 1980s about a young couple caught up in a tribal war and traditional customs. It stars people from the Yakul tribe on the island of Tana, which is where that famous volcano is, of course, who speak a very rare dialect. Bentley Dean is the film's co-director, co-producer and director of photography, DOP. He's blown away by the nomination.
When we first started, we were working with a community in Tana who had actually never even seen a film before, let alone acted in one. And Martin and I, my co-director, had never directed one. We didn't have a story. People had, of course, never acted. And, where the village that we were living in, there's no electricity. So to actually be at this stage, nominated as, one in 5 of the best foreign language films on the planet is extraordinary.
Yeah, it is. Bentley Dean says he's managed to get the news through to the island and is hopeful some of the film stars can be in Hollywood for the Oscars ceremony.
Court Lingai, who was one of the chiefs that we actually stayed with, he's also one of the actors in the film. I said to him the news, and I sort of had to explain a little bit, what it means. I had a go before, but it's hard to get your idea around, I think, the significance of the Oscars ceremony. But I think he understands, just how important it is, and also asked if he was up for coming over in February for the awards ceremony. He was very excited by that.
That was Bentley Dean, the co-director and co-producer of the film Tana, which is the first Australian-made film to receive an Oscar nomination in the Best Foreign Language Film category. Wonderful. Obviously, we'll be covering the Oscars when they happen. It's coming up to about 1.5 minutes to 6. Actually, as I said that, it was exactly 1.5 minutes to 6. In breaking news, the Wellington Police say they've arrested a 52-year-old man on charges of criminal damage following a spate of tyre slashing incidents in Miramar beside the airport there over the past few months. The arrest comes after residents in and around Cody Street complained about airport users parking in their streets for free instead of paying for airport parks. Of course, that suburb is within walking distance of Wellington Airport, so rather than paying to park there, you park your car on someone's outside someone's house, and then in some cases they were leaving it there for weeks. Clearly people had had a guts full. A 52-year-old has been arrested on charges of criminal damage following a spate of tyre slashing. After the news at 6, Bill English is going to join us. We're going to speak at length. It's our first interview with him this year. He's been Prime Minister for about a month. It's election year. He has his State of the Nation speech coming up, I think, a week tomorrow. What does he hope to achieve over and above re-election? Obviously, lots of suggestions about what you would like us to discuss with him, and the sorts of subjects that you are raising are housing unaffordability and inequality. Over and over and over again, people address this with us, and we're at a meeting in East Auckland where iwi leaders are planning to build a controversial housing development. We'll get the latest on that, all of that and more coming up after the pips and the news.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. The government is using emergency powers introduced after the Kaikoura earthquake to require about 300 buildings to be urgently fixed in the next 12 months. The rules will apply to unreinforced masonry facades and parapets in Wellington, Lower Hutt and Blenheim, where there is a heightened risk of an aftershock. Here's our political reporter, Demelza Leslie.
Official advice indicates Wellington, Lower Hutt and Blenheim are 8 times more likely to be hit by aftershocks over the next 3 years. The Building and Construction Minister, Nick Smith, says the new regulations will ensure any masonry in those areas is secure. He says a $3 million fund set up with local councils will cover up to half of the costs of the works. The Society for Earthquake Engineers says retail areas such as Cuba Street in Wellington and Jackson Street in Batoni are of greatest concern. The regulations will be in place by the end of February. From Parliament, Demelza Leslie.
The new US president is reportedly preparing to sign several executive orders aimed at restricting immigration, making good on his election promises. Donald Trump has tweeted that it will be a big day for national security. The BBC's David Willis reports from Washington.
Mr. Trump is expected to sign orders relating to the tightening of security along the US-Mexico border, and later in the week, reports suggest he will act on a pledge to halt access to the country for refugees until such time as the vetting process can be made more rigorous, and limit access to citizens from 7 African and Middle Eastern countries, all countries with predominantly Muslim populations. Immigrant and humanitarian organisations are likely to be outraged by the measures, given the growing crisis surrounding the plight of Syrian refugees.
David Willis. A Qualifications Authority report shows officials found dirty classrooms, absent students and underqualified tutors at an Auckland tertiary institution. The authority has since shut down the Aotearoa Tertiary Institute, which had nearly 200 foreign students, most of them from India. The report from a surprise visit to the institute in November says it had just 4 toilets for nearly 200 students, a head business tutor with no business qualifications, and piles of unmarked assignments. Staff at Manukau Institute of Technology now have to assess if ATI's students should be credited with some of the papers they say they've completed. The mother of a 6-year-old girl taken out of the country by her father says she's not surprised he failed to appear in court. Alan Langdon sailed to Australia with his daughter Kui last month while in the middle of a custody dispute. He failed to appear in the Te Awamutu District Court today on a charge of taking a child out of New Zealand. Mr Langdon says no summons has been served on him and he can't afford to travel back to New Zealand. Ariane Weiler says it was hugely irresponsible for Mr Langdon to take their daughter to sea, but she's just happy she has her back.
It was just so beautiful to hold her in my arms and just have her smile and just be a happy girl, and just to be in her presence, you know, that was just really amazing.
Ariane Weiler. Queenstown is to get an integrated medical facility offering services such as a radiology unit for the first time in the resort town. The facility will also offer surgical endoscopy services, a skin clinic, surgical consultants and a general practice with an urgent care clinic. The current design is for a 4-storey building which will cost $20 million, with construction starting later this year. The MRI unit is expected to open this year in a relocatable building on the site. The police are following up with a Tauranga teenager after he was filmed carting down the Kaimai Ranges. Travis Scott, who's 18, posted the video online showing him traversing down the dangerous stretch of road on State Highway 29, sometimes crossing the centre line. The police say it's not illegal to use the luge-like vehicle on roads, but they strongly advised against it with the risk of serious injury. And they say riders must obey the road rules like everyone else. Travis Scott says it was just a bit of fun.
I'd be pretty gutted if they got involved, to be honest, because I reckon it's just a bit of harmless fun. But, I'm pretty ready to take it on the chin if they want to charge me or something.
Travis Scott. The police in Tauranga say they'll be making further inquiries. The rail line between Christchurch and the West Coast is to reopen after the clearance of a major slip brought down by last week's storm. The Midland line, which travels from Christchurch to Greymouth and includes the Transalpine service, will be back in service tomorrow. It's 6:05. To sport, and Serena Williams has continued her pursuit of a record 7th Australian Open singles title with a straight sets quarter-final win over Johanna Konta. The 22 times Grand Slam champion will play unseeded Croat Mirjana Lucic-Baroni in the last four. Serena's sister Venus will meet fellow American Coco Vandeweghe in the other semi-final. Tonight, 2009 men's champion Rafael Nadal faces the third seed Milos Raonic in the quarter-finals. The pair met just 2 weeks ago in the Brisbane International, where Raonic won in 3 sets. Nadal says he knows he has to improve his game.
In Brisbane, he beat me. At the same time, it's true that I have been close. So it's tough. He's an opponent that makes you feel that you're playing with a lot of pressure all the time because his serve is huge and he's playing very aggressive from the baseline. So it's going to be a very tough match.
Rafael Nadal. The new head of Formula One is promising a radical shake-up of the sport, having replaced long-time Supremo Bernie Ecclestone at the helm. New Chief Executive Chase Carey says after 40 years with Ecclestone in charge, a change was necessary.
I would expect this is difficult for Bernie. This is a big change for him. I mean, he's run the sport, and he's run the sport, as a one-man. He calls himself a dictator. He's run it as a one-man dictator for a long time. I think the sport needs a fresh perspective.
The new F1 boss, Chase Carey. That's the news.
Uncertainty in Asia.
There's something very strongly symbolic about the TPP suddenly, with the stroke of one pen, being taken away by the United States.
Americans eye up New Zealand.
They're feeling uncertain about America, and not only America but the whole world at the moment, and I think Trump and Brexit are tangible examples of that.
Bernie Ecclestone's exit.
Formula One needs a benevolent dictator. Better to have one man making the decision than a lot of men not making the decision.
The right formula. Guy and Espiner and Susie Ferguson, Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, helping marginalised students to get a fair go in mainstream education. Is improving teacher training the key? And after 10, painter Francis Salol on why he's making 1 million artworks for mental health. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland, Auckland, Waikato, Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. A brief period of rain this afternoon or evening. It'll be fine tomorrow. Waitomo to Wellington, including the central high country, also Wairarapa. Rain clearing and severe northwesterly gales in Wellington and Wairarapa easing. Fine tomorrow, apart from areas of morning and evening cloud. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, a few spots of rain today. Fine tomorrow. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine but isolated showers about Canterbury in the afternoons and evenings. Bulla and Westland, a few showers turning to rain in Westland tonight and Bulla later tomorrow. Fiordland, periods of rain, sometimes heavy with thunderstorms. Otago and Southland, a few showers more frequent and heavier tomorrow with possible thunderstorms in eastern Otago. And the Chatham Islands, a period of rain tonight, fine tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. We've got the Prime Minister on the phone and we're not going to muck around. We're going to bring you in. Prime Minister, are you there?
I am, John.
Nice to talk to you. Happy New Year. Thank you for joining us. I was hoping to have a philosophical kind of chat, but I understand you've got a flight to catch, have you?
I do, yes.
Right, OK. Are you at the airport?
I am.
And are you standing outside the departure gate waiting to be the last man on?
No, it's not that urgent.
OK, well, I'll just talk until it becomes embarrassing and the airline staff are giving you the eye, eh? And will you let us know?
I will.
OK, thank you. Right. First of all, you've been in the job a month. How's it going? Are you used to it? And having watched John Key at close range for, 8 years, is it what you expected?
Look, it feels like a bigger opportunity than I would have expected. There's some aspects of it that'll take a while to get used to. One is just the respect for the office of Prime Minister. I think the individual in it has to earn respect. But wherever you go, whatever you do, people are greatly respectful of the office and not quite used to that as a humble Minister of Finance. And the other thing is just the sheer breadth of it, particularly at the moment. Probably one of the challenges is to get a good understanding of all these international issues, because the Prime Minister deals with a lot more of that than I ever did as a Finance Minister.
OK, let's talk about the TPP, because that's one of them. 11 countries left standing. It looks like both Canada and Japan have said, actually, without America, we're not involved. That's the end of that, isn't it?
Well, look, it's a bit of a moving feast, and everyone's got a different reaction. We want to see, in the long term, free trade in the Asia-Pacific. Canada and Japan were, reluctant initially before they actually joined the TPP. So I think over the next couple of months, our trade minister is going to be off in Washington, talking to them about what their view is, and certainly talking among the trade ministers of all the countries that were involved.
If you try and summarise the opposition to TPP, a lot of it was about sovereignty. A lot of it was about, for example, the notion that Big Pharma might come in and beat the living daylights out of Pharmac. A sense that New Zealand was foregoing something of our own right to determine our own future, right? That we were giving away too much control. With the Americans gone, are you able to contemplate a model that addresses those criticisms?
Well, look, we would want a high-quality agreement, and this kind of agreement is a bit different because it tries to address some of the non-tariff barriers, that's all, the barriers in other countries to your trade. So that does necessarily involve negotiation between countries about their domestic policy settings. New Zealand's used to that because we've done a lot of it with Australia over the years. So, look, there is the option of rethinking whether there's some other kind of vehicle that might be available. There's another school of thought that says, well, the TPP, if in the long run you want the US to continue to engage in our part of the world, which we certainly do, then you continue with something like the TPP because that's the terms they already negotiated and they might join it sometime in the future. There's so many options at the moment. We're not going to pick one all of a sudden and try and run with that.
OK. Speaking of options, and I think we can move on very quickly with this one, an election date. There's speculation that it's either going to be after the Lions tour of New Zealand, so that's kind of mid to late July, or September. Have you got a feeling, winter or spring?
Look, I'll make an announcement about the election date before too long. I think it's good if people know early in the year when the election date's going to be, and it's not a matter of politicking.
OK. Talking of politics, Pike. And there was the sense that what was initially a constructive and optimistic relationship between your predecessor and the Pike families had broken down. Are you able to reinvent that? Do you think there is room to move here?
Well, we're looking at working out an opportunity to meet, but I think any discussion needs to recognise the distress of the families and the objective of getting some degree of satisfaction for them on the one hand. On the other hand, we changed New Zealand's workplace safety law precisely because of the Pike River disaster, and these political promises that somehow a politician will make the decision about going in that mine is misleading the families and illegal. It just cannot be done. So the basis of any discussion will be around New Zealand's current legal framework of safety and health.
OK. How are you going on time there? Have I got you for another minute or two?
Just fine, Johnny.
OK, thank you. OK, thank you. You got State of the Nation, a week tomorrow, is it?
I think so, yes.
Yeah, and that's important, isn't it? Because it's election year, and obviously you want to win. I mean, that's just a statement of fact. But You want to do something more than that, I believe, and that is address the issues of inequality, address the very real problems about housing and people who are excluded from it, and reintroduce hope into the equation for people at the bottom of the scale. Now, are you able to do those things without alienating National's core constituency?
Well, we certainly won't be trying to do all those things in the State of the Nation. But we will be, I think that we've got a government actually with a good record on addressing, in fact, some of the toughest social issues. There may be disagreement over means by which we're doing it, but our direction is pretty clear. And, certainly heading into election year, we think that the approach the government's developed around social investment, around increasing incomes, is the right kind of mix for dealing with what
do you think people understand what social investment is? I mean, Simon Wilson wrote a thing a couple of weeks ago saying if you get social investment right, you're government for the foreseeable future. But do people know what social investment is? And do core Nats, old school Nats, actually like it?
Yes, they do. In my experience as a finance...
So what is it? Define it. Can you define it?
Oh, look, it's just understanding that government should think about how people's lives actually unfold over time in their interactions with government, whether it's a child born into a very an at-risk family or someone with a chronic disability. We now got a much better picture of what happens with people over time, and what that shows us is that smarter interventions and possibly a lot more interventions early on can have some very large payoffs, not just financially, but for the individual.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt there because you talked at the beginning about being treated with respect, and so an interruption is out of order. But you talked about smarter and possibly more. People who are suspicious of social investment say, actually, it's an excuse to remove a whole lot of money and say, well, we're targeting the most needy. Is this a wolf in sheep's clothing?
No, it isn't. And our track records pretty clearly demonstrate on just a couple of tougher areas. We've addressed family violence, where all the people who deal with family violence, I think, are pretty supportive of the direction because it was several years of work have gone in, and now significant amounts of money are going into improving how we deal with family violence because there's so much improvement can be made.
Right. Are you saying the existing model's not working? In other words, are you saying that what this government has been doing, your government, you're now Prime Minister, you were Minister of Finance, has not worked as well as you would like, and the rising inequality and the inaccessibility of the housing market for many people is a result of a failure of what?
No, I'm not saying that, and you're addressing different things here in the same discussion. So what we've just been talking about is dealing with the most complex families and households and communities, and we have taken the view for some time that the traditional public service system has not worked well for those most in need of government support. With respect to housing affordability, we've addressed that issue at some length, and of course it takes time to do so, but getting more houses on the ground faster is the only long-term answer. We've done any number of other subsidiary policy changes to assist that, and this year I think you're going to see the further progress in the right direction.
Okay.
1,000 houses built in Auckland last year.
Okay, what's the date today? It's the 25th. Is it the 25th? The 23rd. Radio New Zealand News, so it's 2 days ago. Housing in many New Zealand cities severely unaffordable. I mean, you say you're addressing it, but actually in real terms, this is still theoretical, isn't it? I mean, it is not in real terms being addressed on the ground as we speak.
In real terms on the ground as we speak, it is, because the only... when you've got house prices rising a bit faster than incomes, affordability, that measure that demographia use is going to get worse. But the process of getting more houses on the ground is a bit complicated. Most of the decisions are actually made by councils, not by government. We've been helping them with that and with infrastructure funding in the next 12 months. And the government's got its own building program where we've had to turn around from building about 300 new houses a year to a program that's going to build thousands of houses a year. And just the straightforward issue of the construction industry finding the people to do that has been quite a challenge, but it's underway.
Okay, now we've got a call on the other line saying actually you're being very polite and you have to go. So I thank you for your time. So the State of the Nation is going to be indicative of government policy, but it's not going to lay it all out because it's election year and you've got the government. What is the most important signal you want to send?
Well, you'll just have to wait and see.
Fair enough. One question before you go, because we've been covering it, and you're a Dipton boy originally. Rodeos, do you like them?
Yes, and I've been to a few.
And there's no issues around cruelty there?
Well, look, they've got their own codes there, and they have animal welfare officers on the job. There's been a select committee inquiry into it. So I think people feel that there's enough awareness of animal welfare and safety that the rodeos can continue.
Bill English, Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Bill English, who was very patiently talking to us from Wellington Airport, I believe, as he was about to board a flight. It's 6:19. The father of Kui Langdon says he will not be returning to New Zealand, and he hasn't heard from the police since he left on December 17. Alan Langdon sparked a massive search over the Christmas holiday period when he took his daughter to Australia. Today, police issued a warrant for his arrest after he failed to appear in the Te Awa Mutu District Court, where he faced a charge of taking his daughter out of New Zealand without court permission. Mr Langdon told our producer Bridget Burke he has not heard from authorities and he has no money to return.
There's no point in me coming to New Zealand. Come to New Zealand to defend the charges. Well, actually, I did take that child to Australia with the full knowledge that she wasn't to be removed. The fact is I did that. So,
Alan, have New Zealand police been in touch with you today?
No, haven't been in touch with me at all.
At all?
From New Zealand, nothing.
Not since any of this has happened? Not since...
I've been up at the police station.
So New Zealand police have made zero contact with you during this whole process, including while you were sailing and when you got to Australia?
Yep.
You've not heard from the New Zealand authorities, not Ministry of Foreign Affairs, not police, courts,
nothing, no.
Lawyers, nothing?
No, the only one that got in touch on email was Rangers, somebody saying that the Coast Guard was searching for me from New Zealand.
Right.
And the first thing I did when I got my phone working when I got here was I emailed back to him to say safe and sound, all okay. But there was never any drama.
It must be really difficult, Alan. You're in a position now where you're in Australia. There's a warrant in New Zealand out for your arrest. You'll want to probably come back to New Zealand at some point to reconnect with Kui, your daughter.
I want Kui to come home to Australia.
Okay.
I want her to come and visit. She's an Australian. She's got the right to have all the benefits and privileges of being an Australian. I mean, nothing's against New Zealand, but Australia's pretty good, mate.
And you haven't seen her since, nor spoken to her since that moment?
I haven't seen her or spoken to her, and no one that I know, none of my and Kui's friends, know anything about Kui. No one that we know anything about Kui.
And have Australian authorities been able to help you?
No.
Have you asked for their help?
Oh, the police were here straight away. Then I have definitely asked for their help. But what's happened now is they too were under the assumption that she was a New Zealander. She's an Australian, living in Australia with her Australian father.
Alan, are you going to come back to New Zealand to get her?
At the moment, I don't have any money.
That's Alan Langdon speaking to our producer Bridget Burke earlier today. Now, in the last few minutes, the police have confirmed to Checkpoint they have not been in contact with Alan Langdon since he left New Zealand. Meanwhile, Kui's mother, Ariana Wiley, told me today she was not surprised her former partner didn't return. She said she had concerns about a lack of safety and communication equipment on board the catamaran and was worried Kui may have been alone on deck while her father was sleeping, as there was only one bed on board, one sleeping berth. This is strongly denied by the 6-year-old father. Ariana told me about the moment last week she was reunited with Kui.
It's fantastic. It was just so beautiful to hold her in my arms and just have her smile and just be a happy girl, and just to be in her presence, that was just really amazing.
How long was it when you had no idea where she was?
Far too long.
And what was it like?
The not knowing has been really quite stressful, and you have to know it's not only me as her mother, but it's a whole lot of people that didn't know and were very worried about, where were they, their whereabouts, and then also they were at sea, and you never know, yes.
So you knew they'd gone to sea, right? And you'd been told that?
I've been told that. On the 20th of December, I've spoken with someone that told me that they were at sea, but I didn't know anything else.
This has been a difficult custody issue between you and Ellen, and it's ongoing. It's before the family court, so I don't want to talk about that. But and we can't talk about it anyway.
Yes.
But when you found out Kui was in Australia, that she was alive and well, that you were going to be able to see her and, as it's turned out, get her, what was that like?
But I was over the moon, obviously, to finally know where she is and just meet her, see her again.
So you got on a plane immediately from Switzerland to Australia?
Fairly quickly, yes. Packed my bags and I was gone, yeah.
Kui's mum, Ariane, talking to me earlier today. Leaders of an iwi planning to build a controversial housing development in East Auckland are meeting with residents after facing angry opposition to the proposal. Ngāti Paoa plans to build about 300 houses on part of the Point England Reserve, but residents have launched 2 petitions to try to stop a bill being passed through Parliament to enable the land to be used for housing. Other locals are upset they've had no say in the plans and other developments in the area. Our reporter Sharon Brett-Kelly is at the hui at Rua Potaka Marae in Glen Innes. I think we can hear the wind coming in on your microphone. Hi Sharon, what's happening?
Oh, hello John. Well, the welcome is underway at the moment. In fact, they might just be winding up now, and then the hui is going to begin, and that is where the Chief Executive, Hoauru Rawiri, he's the Chief Executive of Ngāti Paoa the Iwi Trust, he's going to be speaking, explaining their situation, what their plans are. They're very concerned about getting the community on board, about including the community, but of course there has been already a lot of opposition to it and work hasn't even begun on it yet.
Okay, what is upsetting the residents? What's the opposition about?
It's really complicated, John, because there are a number of issues here. There are some who are worried that building these 300 odd houses is going to destroy an endangered estuary. Well, it's going to destroy a nesting place for endangered estuary birds like the New Zealand dotterel. Some say they're going to lose a lot of green space. They're taking about 1/3 of the playing fields. Now, a big concern here is this is going to set a precedent for taking other reserve for building houses. And so a lot of this anger is directed at the government more than Ngāti Paoa. But of course, Ngāti Paoa is caught up in it because they are in the deal to buy this 12 hectares of the reserve so that they can build the houses. And that is part of their treaty settlement.
Sharon Brett-Kelly, who is live from the meeting. Thank you so much. It's only a bit gusty out there this evening. The time is coming up to 27 minutes past 6. You are with Checkpoint. The French capital has inaugurated its first autonomous shuttle bus service as an experiment in what Paris authorities hope will be the future of public transport. This report from Rosanna Philpott.
Shuttling their way to a greener city, Paris opening its first driverless buses to the public on Monday. Fully electric and fully autonomous, the EZ10 transports up to 10 passengers across the Seine between 2 main stations. The buses use laser sensors to analyse their surroundings on the road, and for now they don't have to share it with any other vehicles.
The vehicle will adapt to its environment and to pedestrians crossing in front of it, so it'll either slow down or emergency brake if someone jumps in front of it.
José Gomez has been driving buses here for 26 years. He'll oversee the smooth operation of the autonomous bus.
Fewer people come on board. It's slower, it's electric, it doesn't pollute and can be stored away more easily, but it will never replace a traditional bus.
The shuttle comes as Paris faces high pollution levels. City Mayor Anna Hidalgo wants to reduce the number of cars while authorities crack down on traffic restrictions. It may be a short 130-metre stretch for the buses, but for Paris, it's a big step towards promoting cleaner transport.
Quite extraordinary seeing buses operated by nobody. Just before we go tonight, it's milking time at the Australian Reptile Park in New South Wales, and it's about saving lives. The park is calling on members of the public to capture deadly funnel web spiders and deliver them to the park in an effort to produce much needed anti-venom. Park manager Tim Faulkner says antidote supplies are at an all-time low following recent heat waves across Australia, which have caused an increase in the number of spider and snake bites.
Now what we do is gently stroke the spider or aggravate it a little bit. What happens there, venom accumulates on the end of the fangs in little drops. We don't want it to shake off that venom, but from here we touch the end of the fangs with the glass pipette and the venom sucks up. And that's it, right there.
That's Tim Faulkner with the job he's entirely welcome to. He's the park manager. The Australian Reptile Park milks more than 500 spiders every few months before the venom is sent to a vaccine maker to convert into the life-saving antidote. A real increase in the number of spider and snake bites in Australia over this summer. That's the end of Checkpoint for tonight. Thank you for being with us. Just if you're listening to us on the radio, we are also available now on Facebook to watch live streaming from 5 o'clock on the RNZ website, on Freeview Channel 50 and on YouTube, but we will continue, of course, to be on Radio New Zealand too. Thank you for being with us, however you have joined us. On behalf of our excellent team, ka kite anō, and a very good evening indeed.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Some 300 buildings in quake-prone areas are being forced to secure unreinforced masonry and parapets after the government passed emergency laws. Immigration in the United States is about to be severely restricted as Donald Trump starts fulfilling campaign promises. The mother of a 6-year-old girl taken out of the country says it was hugely irresponsible for Alan Langdon to take their daughter to sea, and she's not surprised he missed his court appearance today. A Tauranga teenager is in the gun after carting down the Kaimai Rangers. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Sick of the blokes going on about the tackle ball law, or the kids bickering over whose turn it is with the flash boogie board, or Cheryl going on and on and on about your cousin's wedding and how your top is a little snug round the middle.